Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. On this podcast, we explore everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. This episode is coming to you slightly later in the week. Unfortunately, I feel there must be something going around at the moment. The guest I had lined up last week and this week both needed to postpone due to illness. Of course, these things happen. We roll with it. But I didn't have any episodes up my sleeve. So here we are with a solo one for you today. I am also going to record a Q&A episode later this month. So I've opened up the comment section at the bottom of the show notes. If you are wanting me to get on here and answer any questions, if there's a topic in particular you'd love for me to discuss on this podcast, please submit whatever you are wanting to hear. If it's too long or you want to stay anonymous, feel free to email me or message me on Instagram. I'll leave all my details in the show notes. But I really loved doing the Q&A last time. I got some great questions, so please make sure you send them through and I would love to answer them. I have been in focus mode the last few weeks, working on a secret, new, exciting offering, which I cannot wait to share with you guys. It's taking up all of my current energy and focus because I really just want to get it finished and out there. I'm not going to give too many clues away just yet, but it is going to be focused on nervous system regulation. It's going to be focused on retraining the brain, building a healthy mindset. It's going to be community focused, and it's going to be one of my more affordable offerings. So I'm really excited about this. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Looking forward to sharing more with you guys when the time is right. Today's topic of conversation is changing your mind and owning it. I'm going to get you to change your mind about changing your mind, because you are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to shift your beliefs. You are allowed to think something different. And I encourage you to own that. So this episode came to me after a conversation last week with a family member. And we were talking about something that we used to have regular debates about. We both had quite opposing views on this thing. I won't go into too much detail. But I had said to this person that I'd changed my mind on the subject. And they were a bit taken aback, because if you'd met me 5-10 years ago, I was very strongly opinionated. And I came back and said, I've changed my mind. I used to believe this, but now I believe this. And this change has happened because I come to understand this information and it changed my thinking. That's how I responded. And then the person in question laughed under their breath and said, see, I told you so. I knew I was right the whole time. And in that moment, I realized a few things. There was a little bit of biting my tongue and uncomfortability, because I just knew deep down there was no point in going in to defend my old self and my old beliefs. So that was the first thing. The other realization that came to me is how much we can waste our energy trying to convince someone of our point of view and what we think. And I realized in that moment how far I'd come, not needing to justify or over-explain. If we think back to 2020, I think everyone can get a picture of what I'm talking about here when I say trying to convince someone of our point of view. So anyway, it led me to thinking about this idea around changing our minds. And I think a lot of us have a very interesting relationship with changing our minds and owning it. I think when it comes to people admitting that they've changed their views, they can be easily seen as indecisive or wishy-washy, or friends and family might even call them a hypocrite. And on top of that, we have this cancel culture in 2025. People are so afraid of switching lanes or changing their mind and what other people will think if they actually put it out there, because they might be cancelled. So that's another thing. I definitely think that is changing though. If we are the person changing our viewpoint, changing our perspective, updating our perspective, it can feel like we are contradicting ourselves. We don't want to look foolish and be seen wrong about something, and that's when the ego steps in. There's also this idea called the sunk cost fallacy. We often, as humans, continue our beliefs, continue our behaviors because of the time and the energy we've already put into it. So our brains are wired to avoid loss more than to seek gain. And that can keep us clinging to things, beliefs, ways of thinking that no longer serve us, just because we've put so much energy into defending it. And it also could be, the fear of being judged or having to change a value system underneath it as well. There's a lot of loss in that. But the point I really want to get at is changing your mind is not a sign of weakness or indecision, as we may have once thought. It is a signal and it is a sign that, in fact, you're learning, you're growing, and you're actually aligning with what feels right for you now at this point in your life. And I really think it's a sign of emotional intelligence and openness, because we are meant to evolve. We are meant to upgrade our belief systems. We are meant to change what we think about things. And if we didn't do this, life would be very boring and we'd feel and stay very stagnant. I was listening to a recent episode of the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett. And at the end of the episode, he was saying that the more you know and the more information you gain, the less you actually know. He was talking about how it's quite discombobulating interviewing so many different people with so many different ideas, because he's constantly updating his latest perspective and opinion, and it just leaves him with more questions. But I thought about that, and I really think that that's a great mindset to be in, because it just shows that you're not fixed on anything in particular. It can be an uncomfortable process when we start to really question things, but I think that's so true. The more information you have, the more people you talk to, the more you realize that, there's a whole lot of stuff we don't know. Over the years, I have changed my mind on so many things. Some small things like routines, like preferences. Others are bigger things, locations I want to live in. I've changed my opinion on some political things. I've changed my mind on relationship values, intimacy values. And it's really only been in the last few years that I've really had the confidence to own that. I've really had the confidence to say I have changed my mind and be okay with that. So I'm going to share with you guys some more general mindset shifts, things I've changed my mind on. I'm going to give you general ones because I think, there's an opportunity to learn in some of these. I want you to think about what you believe as I go through these. And as I give you some information and some things to think about, maybe you will even feel like changing your mind after listening. And as I go through these, notice I say, I currently believe. Because this is the thing, right? Currently believe refers to me at this point, this time, this moment in my life. Tomorrow, I might wake up and I might read a book and actually upgrade my beliefs again. I might have new input that will make me change my mind. And I really want to stress this because we limit ourselves so much by really fixed labels that come through in our language. So the first one is, I used to believe that illness, stress, or certain struggles just run in the family. My mum had it, my auntie had it, my gran had it. It's just going to run in the family, that kind of mentality. However, I changed my mind and I currently believe that this is not the full story, meaning I do not agree that things just run in family lineage and we have no influence. Let me explain why. Actually, before I even explain why, I want you to quickly think about whether you have any beliefs about anything in particular that runs in your family, mainly when it comes to personality traits, maybe stress tendencies like anxiety. Could be like my mum struggled to lose weight, my nana struggled to lose weight, my great nana struggled to lose weight. Therefore, I've just surrendered to the fact that I'll be the same. I want you to think about whether you have any of these run in the family beliefs, because the first part is actually catching what we believe to be fact. If you think something runs in the family, there is absolutely no room for change in that sentence. When we have these beliefs like my anxiety, my autoimmune issues, my chronic pain, my energy, they were inevitable because they run in the family. It assumes that they are hardwired into our DNA and there is no control whatsoever. And I once believed this until I came across this idea called epigenetics, and it completely changed how I see this. So epigenetics teaches us that although we inherit genes, that is correct, it's not a fixed blueprint. So we can't change our genes. However, we do have influence over how they are expressed. So our environment, our lifestyle, our stress levels, our nutrition, our sleep, even and actually particularly our thoughts and emotions can influence which genes are switched on and what ones are switched off. I really think this changes so much simply by opening up to this conversation of just because a lot of my family members are dealing with this or have this type of tendency, it does not necessarily mean you're going to turn out that way or get that particular diagnosis or illness. By creating a safe and nourishing environment for our nervous system, our mind, we can literally reduce the risk of repeating family patterns. And this is how we begin to interrupt patterns of generational trauma. It takes someone in the family line showing up in a whole new way. They are the circuit breaker. Probably a lot of you listening to this podcast are that person because it requires work and it really requires us to look at our own patterns and how we treat ourselves as well. So that's the first one. I used to think it was all just inevitable, and then I changed my thinking about that. The next one, I used to believe that the older you got, the wiser you got. How naive was I? That is not necessarily true. I definitely changed my thinking on that one. And I realized that what actually makes someone wiser in my very small 33-year experience is actually self-reflection, curiosity, humility, and the willingness to look at the difficult stuff and learn from mistakes. Wisdom does not come from the number of birthdays somebody has had. And it took me quite a long time to upgrade my thinking around this. And to be honest, quite a bit of frustration due to hidden expectations. Really, being older doesn't automatically mean someone has it figured out or they have all the answers. I mean, take parents, for example. Most of us have had that realization when you get to a certain age where you start to see your parents differently. You start seeing them as people rather than parents. You realize that they might not have all the answers. They don't really know how to handle every single thing or respond to challenges maybe in the way that you personally would. You start to see them as they are, not just in the role that they play in your life. When you begin to see your parents as fully human, their fears, their aspirations, if you've had that conversation, their mistakes, maybe some of the challenges they've overcome in the past, you start to release the hold of the old narratives, the resentment and the frustration. You recognize that they carry their own unhealed wounds, especially while raising you, and they had complete lives before you came along and lives that continue to evolve even long after you've left home. And once you have that realization and you start connecting the dots and understanding that someone's only relating from a level that they had the capacity to relate at, or how they were taught or how they were raised, it really starts to change a lot of your viewpoints and how you deal with emotions, because everybody is learning as they go at their own pace. Everybody is carrying their own fears, their own wounds, their own unanswered questions. And when you can change your mind from hidden expectation and frustrations into acceptance of somebody and them as a whole person, I think it allows for, well, it has in my case, a lot more compassion and patience with people, even if they're older, well, especially if they're older. Okay, the next one. I used to believe and even feed into conversations the idea that some people are just inherently toxic, that certain traits like narcissism, a toxic person, that was who they were. And I have changed my mind about that because I think as humans, we're far more complex. Don't get me wrong, I do think people have narcissistic tendencies. I've also changed my mind in the sense that I used to think it was completely random if the same type of person would just show up in your life and you'd be dealing with that toxic person and that toxic person or that selfish friend. You just keep getting that same person, maybe a flaky friend. But I have upgraded my opinion. I've upgraded my belief around that. That change in thinking come from observing myself in certain relationships and patterns and themes. It come from reading books. It come from listening to podcasts. When we are in the mindset that toxic people, flaky people, negative people just happen to be in your life and you have no control over it, I personally think that that is a victim mindset. Of course, there are certain people, work colleagues and that kind of thing that, you can't really choose to not have them in your life at certain points. But when it happens consistently, when it's taking up all of your conversation, all of your energy, you're getting the same type of relationships show up all the time, it's not about the other person. It takes some self-reflection. What I realized when I started to change my mind on this is it starts internally. Rather than it's their fault, why are these toxic people not showing up in my life? Flip it around, ask yourself, what is it about me that is drawn to this dynamic? What is it about me that is entertaining this dynamic? Why am I maintaining this relationship or friendship? What am I getting out of this? What is it feeding me? What parts of me need some healing? That is uncomfortable. If you had talked to me 10 years ago, this would not have even crossed my mind. You can even ask yourself, what is my nervous system chemically wired to expect? If you go back to that episode around attachment styles, that would be a really good one to listen to. But if you've grown up in instability, if you've grown up seeing volatile interactions, your nervous system gets used to a certain chemical cocktail, essentially. And when you go into relationships, friendships, romantic relationships in the future, it feels familiar to connect with certain types of people. I know that when I started to change my thinking around this, yes, it was uncomfortable to look at my part to play and what I was sort of feeding and letting stay in my life with no boundaries or not being honest and conversations and that kind of thing. Although it was difficult, once I made some aha moments, I realized that people are often just a mirror of how we're treating ourselves, right? So, how we are treating ourselves internally. If we are judging people, we are likely to somewhere at some time get that judgment back. If we are gossiping about people, chances are it's going to come back around. If we are self critical, it is my belief that the universe will send us people to mirror back to us where we need to be kinder to ourselves. So you might get really critical people in your life, or critical colleagues, or a critical partner. This is how I now see the world. And it has changed the way I think about relationships and show up in relationships because it gives us a new choice point. I get to choose how I respond to people in my life, and the only thing that we as individuals can do is work on our own responses and reactions. This change in mindset, change in thinking will give you so much more empowerment when it comes to your relationships rather than just thinking everyone else around you is negative or toxic or narcissistic. It starts internally. It makes life so much easier when we get this. And the last one I had for today, this one is especially for females. I used to believe that I'd only be truly happy if I had some physical enhancements. I thought happiness was tied to a lot to my appearance, and I believed that if I altered certain parts of my physical body or, lost weight, did some enhancements, then that would make me feel enough. There was a time in my life, I don't know how long ago, I was literally going to pre-appointments to get a breast augmentation. I was up all night Googling what procedure I could get to fix and take away these barely noticeable acne scars, right? I could be so insecure about different things. And then something shifted significantly. I changed my mind suddenly. This wasn't a slow shift like the other ones. This is quite a sudden, abrupt one when my mum was diagnosed with cancer. Because in that moment, what was important became crystal clear. It's like I had this, I wouldn't say overnight, but over a course of a year, I had a very sharp realization. I realized that we can spend our whole life as women and men, picking our bodies apart. There's always going to be something else we need to change. And we are fed into this loop of looking for solutions externally, looking for the next thing externally. We are sold so many products. We are constantly on this hamster wheel of marketing. I realize that getting older is a privilege, and I don't really want to, at this point in my life currently, freeze my expressions and make changes to myself currently. I realized that there will always be a new trend, because even if I think about the last 10 years, I feel like the trend has gone from, gone up and down and roundabouts, and there was like skinny, fit, BBL, I don't know what else is out there. I realized that peace doesn't come simply by changing how I look. Yes, I might feel a little bit better, but it actually comes from how I relate to myself internally. Happiness can feel, for so many of us, like it is this goal that is always out of reach. And as I'm learning more and more and more, happiness is actually a byproduct of how honest we are with ourselves and how much we're making choices in alignment with our true desires and what our intuition is telling us. Now, all of this to say, I am not against any enhancements, any surgery. People do it for themselves, they do it for their own reasons. I think the thing that is really important to ask is, am I doing this for myself, or am I doing it for external validation? I'm well aware that we do live in a physically orientated world, and that said, it's only natural to want to show up in a way that feels good to you, where you can feel like it's aligned, where you are looking your best, feeling your best. And don't get me wrong, I totally get that. But here's the truth. No amount of external change can replace the energy, the confidence, and the peace that you can cultivate internally. And this is currently, as I said, currently speaking as someone who up until now I haven't had Botox, fillers, anything like that. I can tell you that there is immense power and embracing and being happy with who you are, and not necessarily jumping straight into trends because that's what everyone is doing. It almost feels like an act of resistance to not do something that everyone is doing, because society puts a lot of pressure on how we look, and it can be tempting to think that just by changing something external, it will fix that internal discomfort. So this is something I have really changed my mind around. As I said, currently, maybe ask me 10 years down the track. But for now, this is what feels good for me. This is what feels aligned for me. Plus, I feel like we underestimate the glow up that can really happen when you are regulating your nervous system, when you are in healthy relationships, when you start to process emotions. All of that is the foundation of radiance, I believe. And liking yourself, being kind to yourself, that's a big one. Now, I chose those 4 things that I changed my mind on because those topics semi-fit in with this podcast. But I want you to reflect on some of the beliefs that you've shifted, and remember that if you change your mind, own it. And if you change it again, own it. You do not need to be over-explaining. You do not need to reply to the "see, I told you so" from family and friends. Own it. There might be a bit of discomfort with it. Sit through it and then carry on. I think it's really important that we get used to changing our mind about things and being okay, and giving people the space as well. I do want to say, giving people the space to change their mind and actually seeing it as a real strength, actually seeing it as people wanting to evolve. Because if someone comes and they're like, look, I've changed my mind around this, and I know you said this, I wasn't really listening, but now I am. That's a really brave thing that someone can do. It's not a weakness, that's actually courage in action. Rather than judging or shaming people that are growing and learning, we can actually choose to celebrate them, acknowledge their bravery for reflecting, for updating their beliefs, and stepping into new ways of thinking, because I think that just cultivates a whole lot more compassion in our relationships. So I want you to give yourself credit for the beliefs and the thinking that you've changed and owned, the times that you've been open to consider new information. Maybe it's in the way you parent, and the rules that you once had that you now don't. Maybe it's in your political views. Maybe you've done a switch there. Maybe it's once that you only trusted conventional medicine and now you're looking in another direction. There are so many things, big things, that you are allowed to change your mind on. And I want to leave you with this quote because I really like this one. It's by Adam Grant. Changing your mind doesn't mean you've abandoned your principles. It may mean you've learned something. It's better to contradict yourself and be accused of hypocrisy than to stick to your guns and sacrifice your integrity. The hallmark of integrity is honesty, not consistency. I think that really sums up all the points that I wanted to get across today. Anyway, my friends, I hope you've enjoyed today's quick episode. Please remember to send in your questions, put them in the comment section below. Let me know what you want to hear, how I can support you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the week. Have a fabulous weekend, and I'll catch you on the next episode.